Then another, and Marcus, he was about to become the most powerful man in the neighborhood. The first thing Marcus Chen noticed when he pulled into his driveway was the silence. No familiar hum of his irrigation system, no gentle spray of water across his prized rose garden, just the oppressive quiet of a phoenix. Afternoon in July, where the temperature gauge on his truck read 118 degrees, but as he walked toward his front door, his landscaping told a different story. The roses that had taken him 3 years to cultivate were wilted, their petals scattered like confetti across the bone-dry soil. "Son of a bitch," Marcus muttered, dropping his medical bag on the porch. He walked around the side of his house, following the irrigation line toward the street. That's when he saw it, a crater. That's the only way to describe what had been carved into his front yard. The hole was roughly 6 feet wide and 4 feet deep, with orange safety cones scattered around the perimeter like a child's forgotten toys. At the bottom, he could see the gleaming metal of freshly cut pipes sealed with bright red caps. "Excuse me, sir." Marcus turned to see a woman in a HOA windbreaker jogging toward him, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail that bounced with each step. She was probably in her 50s, with a kind of artificially white smile that suggested years of HOA board meetings and neighborhood disputes. "Are you the homeowner?" she asked, slightly out of breath. "Dr. Marcus Chen, I live here, and I'd like to know why my water line has been severed." The woman's smile widened, though her eyes remained cold. "I'm Janet Morrison, HOA president. We sent you multiple notices about this repair work." "What notices?" "May 15th, June 3rd, June 20th, July 1st, and July 8th. All sent to the email address on file." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "I never received any emails." "Well, that's not our problem, is it? The work order was approved by the board 3 months ago. Your water line was running directly under the sidewalk without proper permits. City inspector flagged it as a violation. Without proper permits, I built this house 12 years ago. Everything was up to code." Janet's expression shifted from fake pleasantry to barely concealed contempt. "Dr. Chen, I'm going to be very clear with you. You've been a problem for this board since day one. Your exterior paint is 2 shades too dark, according to the architectural guidelines. And now we discover you've been stealing water from the municipal line. Stealing water." Marcus's voice rose an octave. "I pay my water bill every month. I have the receipts. The water bill for your house? Yes. But this line," she pointed to the severed pipes, "was an unauthorized tap into the main supply. The city has ordered it removed." Marcus stared at her, processing the absurdity of the situation. "The repair will cost $8,000 to bring your system up to current standards. You have 30 days to complete the work or face daily fines. $8,000, plus the $1,200 fine for the initial violation." Marcus felt something shift inside his chest, a familiar sensation from his residency days, when he'd worked 36-hour shifts and survived on nothing but coffee and adrenaline. It was the feeling of being pushed too far. "Janet, I've been working double shifts for 3 weeks straight. I just spent 14 hours trying to save a 7-year-old girl who came in with a massive head injury. I'm tired. I'm stressed. Your emotional state isn't my concern, Dr. Chen. No, but my lawyer's emotional state might be yours." Janet's smile finally faltered. "Are you threatening me? I'm promising you that I'm going to fight this. Every step of the way. Good luck with that." Janet turned to walk away, then paused. "Oh, and Dr. Chen, the next HOA meeting is Thursday at 7. You're welcome to attend and voice your concerns to the board. Though I should mention that we require advance notice for any agenda items." She walked away, her ponytail swaying with each step. Marcus watched her disappear around the corner, then looked back at the crater in his yard. The heat was starting to make him dizzy, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from those severed pipes. His phone buzzed. A text from his neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. "Marcus, my sprinkler stopped working." Another buzz, this time from Derek, who lived 3 houses down. "Dude, my water pressure just dropped to nothing. What's going on?" Marcus blinked, a terrible realization slowly dawning. He walked to the edge of his property line following the direction of the severed pipes. They ran parallel to the sidewalk, disappearing under the concrete and continuing toward the next house, and the next, and the next. His phone rang. Mrs. Patterson. "Marcus, Thank God I've been calling the city for an hour. My water's completely out. The kids can't take showers, and my husband needs to get ready for work. Do you know what happened?" Marcus stared at the sealed pipes, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. "Mrs. Patterson, I think Janet Morrison just cut off water to half the neighborhood." "What? That's impossible. She's the HOA president." "Yeah," Marcus said, a grim smile spreading across his face. "I know." He hung up and immediately dialed. The phone rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. He tried the emergency line, same result. By the time he walked back to his house, his phone had received 12 more texts and 6 missed calls. The pattern was becoming clear. Every house on his side of the street, from the corner to the cul-de-sac, was without water. And based on the direction of the pipes, Marcus was beginning to understand why. Instead of running individual water lines to each house, they'd installed a main line that branched off at strategic points. It was cheaper, faster, and perfectly legal at the time. But it meant that Marcus's unauthorized tap was actually the primary water source for 18 houses. Janet Morrison had just cut off water to half the neighborhood. Marcus sat down on his porch steps, pulled out his phone, and opened his email app. He scrolled through 3 months of messages, looking for anything from the HOA. Nothing. Not in his inbox, not in his spam folder, not in his deleted items. He was about to close the app when he noticed something odd. In his account settings, any email from addresses containing Willowbrook HOA or Janet.Morrison was automatically forwarded to a folder called Trash Forever and immediately deleted. Marcus had never created that rule, but someone with access to his email account could have. He thought about the last HOA meeting he'd attended 6 months ago. Janet had insisted that all residents sign up for the new Willowbrook community portal to receive important updates. She'd personally helped him create the account on his phone, standing behind him as he typed in his email password. "That clever." "Bitch," Marcus whispered. His phone rang again. "We're all without water." "Janet's not answering her phone. What the hell is going on?" Marcus looked at the crater in his yard, then at the growing crowd of neighbors gathering near the corner. Men in business suits checking their phones, women in yoga pants with crying children, teenagers complaining about not being able to shower. Before evening plans, Derek Marcus said, his voice steady for the first time all day, "I think we need to have a conversation with the HOA board. The meeting's not until Thursday." "No," Marcus said, watching as more neighbors emerged from their houses, looking confused and increasingly angry. "I think we need to have that conversation tonight." As the sun began to set over Willowbrook, casting long shadows across the dry lawns and empty swimming pools, Marcus realized that Janet Morrison had made one critical error in her campaign to drive him out of the neighborhood. She'd given him an army. By 7 p.m., Marcus's backyard looked like a refugee camp. 18 families, 43 people, all crammed onto his patio with empty water bottles, crying babies, and faces that grew more furious with each passing minute. Derek had brought his laptop and was frantically researching water rights law. Mrs. Patterson clutched a printout of her water bill. Her elderly husband, Frank, fanning himself with the HOA violation notice. The Rodriguez family had driven their 3 kids over after their youngest had a meltdown when she couldn't fill her kiddie pool. "This is insane," muttered Tom Bradley, a construction foreman who lived at the end of the street. "I've got a newborn at home. My wife needs to sterilize bottles. How the hell are we supposed to manage without water? We could buy cases from the store," suggested Sarah Kim, bouncing her 2-year-old on her hip. "But that doesn't solve the shower problem, or the laundry, or the toilets." Marcus stood on his porch steps, looking out at the sea of frustrated faces. Janet Morrison's house sat smugly at the far end, its landscape lights twinkling like Christmas decorations. "Listen up, Marcus," called out, his voice carrying the authority he'd developed from years of managing crisis situations in the ICU. "I know you're all angry. I know you're scared. But before we decide what to do, we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." He pulled out his phone and opened the photos he'd taken of the severed pipes. "This isn't just about my water line. When Janet cut these pipes, she severed the main supply line that feeds all of our houses. She either didn't know that, or she didn't care." "How is that even legal?" asked Mrs. Patterson. "It's not," Derek said, looking up from his laptop. "I've been reading municipal codes for the past hour. but they can't shut off water to multiple residences without a court order, especially not during a heat advisory. Tom Bradley stepped forward. So, what are you saying? That she broke the law? I'm saying she committed 18 counts of unlawful termination of utility services. Each one is a Class 1 misdemeanor in Arizona. But it gets worse. Derek turned his laptop screen toward the group. Did you know that Janet Morrison isn't just the HOA president? She's also the owner of Morrison Construction Company, the same company that submitted the bid for the waterline repairs. The murmur that rippled through the crowd was electric. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. What are you saying? Sarah Kim asked. I'm saying she created a fake violation, cut off our water, and positioned herself to profit from the repairs. It's textbook extortion. Mrs. Patterson stood up, her voice shaking with rage. That woman came to my house last month. She said my fence was 6 inches too close to the property line. Wanted me to hire a contractor to move it. Guess which contractor she recommended? Morrison Construction. Marcus guessed. Morrison Construction. When I told her I couldn't afford it, she said the fines would keep accumulating until I found the Rodriguez family had been cited for having the wrong type of mailbox. The Johnsons had been fined for parking their RV in their own driveway. The Patel family had been written up for having too many potted plants on their porch. Every violation came with a recommendation from Morrison Construction. She's been running a racket, Tom Bradley said, his voice low and dangerous, using the HOA to shake down residents and funnel business to her company. Marcus felt a cold satisfaction settle in his chest. Derek, how much would it cost to hire an attorney? For what we're looking at, probably 50 grand, maybe more. The crowd deflated. $50,000 was a fortune for most of them. However, Derek continued, if we file a class action lawsuit, we could split the costs. And if we can prove fraud and extortion, we might be entitled to punitive damages. How much are we talking about? Asked Frank Patterson. Derek's grin was predatory. In Arizona, punitive damages can be up to 3 times the actual damages. If we can prove she's been running this scam for years, we could be looking at millions. The energy in the group shifted. Marcus could feel at that moment when desperation transforms into determination. But first, Marcus said, we need to get our water back on tomorrow. Half of us have to work. Our kids need baths. Our houses need to function. We go directly to the source. He walked to the edge of his property, where the main water line ran underground. The pipes were city property, but the shutoff valve was accessible through a small utility cover near the sidewalk. Dr. Chen Sarah Kim said nervously, you're not suggesting we tamper with city utilities, are you? I'm suggesting we restore utility services that were illegally terminated. There's a difference. Tom Bradley was already walking toward the. Any reasonable person would consider this a matter of public safety. But what about Janet? Mrs. Patterson asked. She'll just call the city and have it shut off again. Marcus smiled, and for the first time all day, it was genuine. Actually, she won't, because by the time she figures out what happened, we'll have already filed our lawsuit, and once a case is pending, any attempt to retaliate against the plaintiffs becomes witness intimidation. Derek closed his laptop with a snap. I like where this is going. Here's what we're going to do, Marcus said, his voice taking on the calm, methodical tone he used when explaining complex procedures to medical students. Tom, you and Derek are going to restore our water service. Sarah, you're going to document everything with your phone, Mrs. Patterson. You're going to call the Phoenix Police non-emergency line and report that our utilities were illegally terminated. What about the rest of us? Asked Mr. Rodriguez. As the group dispersed, Marcus felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Mrs. Patterson, her eyes bright with something that looked like hope. Dr. Chen, I've lived in this neighborhood for 23 years. I've watched Janet Morrison bully and intimidate good people until they gave up and moved. A way I never thought anyone would stand up to her. Mrs. Patterson, I save lives for a living. I'm not about to be intimidated by a suburban dictator with a power complex. She squeezed his shoulder. Give her hell, doctor. As Marcus watched his neighbors walk back to their houses, he heard the sound of metal on concrete. Tom Bradley had pried open the utility cover and was turning the main water valve. Within seconds, Marcus could hear the familiar hum of water flowing through pipes, the gentle whoosh of sprinkler systems coming back to life. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You have no idea what you're dealing with. This is your only warning, JM. Marcus stared at the message, then took a screenshot. Tomorrow, it would be evidence. Tonight, it was just another mistake in Jeanette Morrison's rapidly growing collection. He looked across the street at her house, where the lights were still on, in what appeared to be a home office. Through the window, he could see her silhouette, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing frantically. Marcus typed back a simple response. "See you in court." Within minutes, every house on his side of the street had working water. As he walked back to his own house, Marcus could hear the sounds of domestic life resuming: showers, running dishwashers, humming, children laughing as they finally got their baths. But the real victory wasn't the water. It was the realization that Janet Morrison had made a fatal error in judgment. She'd underestimated the power of a community united against a common enemy, and she'd picked a fight with someone who understood that sometimes the best way to perform surgery is to cut deep and fast, removing the entire tumor before it can spread. Tomorrow, the real operation would begin. Marcus woke up at 5:30 a.m. to the sound of his sprinklers. For a moment, he forgot about everything that had happened the day before: the severed pipes, the angry neighbors, the threatening text from Janet Morrison. But as consciousness fully returned, he felt a familiar surge of adrenaline. He had work to do. By 6 a.m., he was sitting in his kitchen with his laptop, a cup of coffee, and a yellow legal pad covered in notes. Derek had emailed him overnight with research on Arizona HOA law, and what Marcus was reading made his jaw clench with each paragraph. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 a.m. Marcus opened it to find a short, balding man in a cheap suit, sweating. Despite the early morning coolness, Dr. Chen, "I'm Carl Brennan, Morrison Construction. I understand you need some waterline work done." Marcus stared at him. "It's 7 in the morning. Mrs. Morrison said it was urgent. She mentioned something about city fines if the work isn't completed promptly." Carl shifted nervously. "I've got a crew ready to start. We can have you back up and running by this afternoon for $8,000. "Well, there might be some wiggle room on the price. Mrs. Morrison said you've been having some financial difficulties." Marcus felt his blood pressure spike. Did she now? "Look, Doc, I'm just trying to help. The longer you wait, the more expensive this gets. Cities charging daily penalties for code violations. Carl, I have a question for you. How long have you been working for Janet Morrison?" "Working for her?" "I don't work for her. Morrison Construction is my company." Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Carl the business registration he'd looked up that morning. According to the state of Arizona, Morrison Construction LLC was incorporated in 2019. The registered owner is Janet E. Morrison. Carl's face went white. That's not right. We're partners." "Really?" "Because the bank records I pulled show that all payments from HOA-mandated repairs go directly into an account controlled solely by Janet Morrison. You're getting a salary, Carl. She's getting the profits." The man looked like he might vomit. "How did you get bank records?" "I didn't. But you just confirmed they exist." Marcus smiled grimly. "Carl, I think you and I need to have a conversation. Would you like some coffee?" 20 minutes later, Carl Brennan was sitting at Marcus's kitchen table, his hands shaking as he signed a sworn affidavit. The story that emerged was even worse than Marcus had imagined. Janet Morrison had approached Carl 3 years ago when his legitimate construction business was struggling. She offered him a partnership she would generate customers through HOA violations, and he would do the work. What he didn't know was that she'd structured the business to cut him out of ownership entirely. "She's been running this scam on dozens of properties," Carl said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Fake violations, inflated repair costs, kickbacks. 2 city inspectors. I kept thinking it would stop, but it just got worse. Why didn't you report her? She's got dirt on everyone. The city inspector who signs off on the violations. He owes her $50,000 from a bad real estate deal. The county clerk who processes the permits. Janet's got photos of him with his secretary at a motel. She's been building leverage for years." Marcus leaned back in his chair. This wasn't just fraud, it was a conspiracy that reached into city government. "Carl, I'm going to ask you to do something that's going to take courage. I want you to wear a wire." "A what?" "I want you to go to Janet Morrison today and tell her you're having second thoughts about the business. Get her to talk about the kickbacks, the fake violations. Everything. I'll provide the recording equipment." Carl shook his head frantically. "She'd kill me." "I'm not kidding, Doc. This woman is dangerous. More dangerous than federal prison. Because that's where you're headed if you don't cooperate." As if on cue, Marcus's phone rang. "Derek, Marcus, you need to get over here now. What's wrong?" "Janet Morrison is in my front yard with 2 city inspectors and a police officer. She's claiming we tampered with municipal utilities." Marcus grabbed his keys. "Carl, you're coming with me, and you're going to tell those inspectors exactly what you just told me." The scene at Derek's house looked like a small-scale military. Operation Morrison stood in the center of the chaos, wearing a crisp business suit and pointing dramatically at the utility cover that Tom Bradley had opened the night before. 2 city inspectors were taking photos while a uniformed police officer scribbled notes. "Dr. Chen," Janet called out as Marcus approached. "Perfect timing. Officer Rodriguez here was just explaining the penalties for tampering with city utilities." Marcus walked past her and extended his hand to the police officer. "Officer Rodriguez, I'm Dr. Marcus Chen. I was the one who authorized the restoration of utility services to these homes." "Sir, you don't have the authority to." "Actually, I do." Marcus pulled out his phone and showed the officer a document he'd downloaded that morning. Arizona Revised Statute 331324 states that residents have the right to emergency restoration of essential utilities when termination poses a threat to health and safety. It was 118 degrees yesterday. We have children and elderly residents. The termination was illegal to begin with. Officer Rodriguez frowned clearly out of his depth. "Ma'am, is what he's saying accurate?" Janet's confident expression flickered. "The termination was authorized by a valid work order." "Was it?" Marcus turned to Carl, who was standing behind him like a reluctant witness. "Carl, would you like to explain to Officer Rodriguez how work orders are generated in this neighborhood?" Carl looked like he wanted to disappear into the pavement. I can't. Let me help," Marcus said. He pulled out his laptop and opened a file. Carl Brennan signed a sworn affidavit this morning detailing how Mrs. Morrison has been fabricating HOA violations to generate business for her construction company. The waterline violation that led to yesterday's work, it was fake. Janet's face went from confident to furious in seconds. "That's defamation. It's testimony." From your own employee, Marcus handed Officer Rodriguez a copy of the affidavit. "Mrs. Morrison, you're in a lot of trouble." The first city inspector, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, if these allegations are true, we need to suspend all pending work orders, pending an investigation." "The allegations are fabricated," Janet snapped. "This man is facing legitimate fines. He's trying to avoid paying them." "Actually," Derek said, walking over with his own laptop. "I spent some time this morning looking into the complaint history for Willowbrook. Funny thing, every single violation in the past 3 years has been filed by Janet Morrison. Not other residents, not routine inspections. Just Janet, the second inspector." A heavy-set woman with a clipboard looked up from her notes. "That is unusual. And every single violation has resulted in a recommendation for Morrison Construction," Derek continued. "No other contractors, just Morrison." Marcus could see Janet's composure cracking. Her hands were clenched into fists, and a vein in her forehead was starting to throb. "Furthermore," Marcus said, pulling out another document, "I've filed a formal complaint with the Arizona Attorney General's office alleging violations of the Racketeering, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act. Mrs. Morrison, you're being investigated for running a criminal enterprise." Janet Morrison stared at him for a long moment, her face cycling through disbelief, rage, and something that looked like genuine fear. When she spoke, her voice was barely controlled. "You have no idea what you've started, Dr. Chen. No idea at all. Actually, I think I do. Carl, why don't you tell Officer Rodriguez about the photos Mrs. Morrison keeps in her safe?" Carl's voice was a whisper. "She's got blackmail material on half the city government. Photos, bank records, hotel receipts. She's been running this operation for years." Officer Rodriguez looked at Janet Morrison with new interest. "Ma'am, I think we need to continue this conversation at the station." "I'm not going anywhere without my attorney," Janet said. "That's your right, but I'm going to need you to come with me voluntarily, or I can get a warrant." As Officer Rodriguez led Janet Morrison toward his patrol car, she turned back to Marcus one last time. "This isn't over." "You're right," Marcus replied. "It's just getting started." The crowd of neighbors that had gathered to watch the confrontation broke into spontaneous applause as the patrol car pulled away. But Marcus felt no sense of victory yet. Janet Morrison was dangerous, and cornered animals were unpredictable. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Basement. Tonight? Come alone." Marcus showed the message to Derek, who frowned. "That's not Janet's number." "No," Marcus said, a chill running down his spine. "I think we just found out how deep this goes." But as he looked around at his neighbors' people who had trusted him to lead them into battle against a corrupt system, Marcus realized that backing down wasn't an option. They'd exposed the tip of the iceberg. Now they had to see what lay beneath the surface. The real war was just beginning. Marcus spent the day preparing for the unknown. He left copies of all his evidence with Derek, emailed documentation to his attorney, and even called his ex-wife in California to give her a heads up that things might get complicated. By evening, he felt as ready as anyone could be for a meeting with anonymous threats. The address in the follow-up text led him to a storage facility on the outskirts of Phoenix, the kind of place where people kept forgotten Christmas decorations and furniture from dead relatives. Unit 247 was tucked away in the back corner, far from the main office and security cameras. Marcus knocked 3 times, as instructed. The metal door rolled up to reveal a man in his 60s, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and his smile had the practiced warmth of a career politician. "Dr. Chen, thank you for coming. I'm City Councilman Richard Blackwood." Marcus had heard the name but couldn't place the face until now. Blackwood had been on the Phoenix City Council for 20 years, a fixture in local politics with aspirations for higher office. "Councilman, I have to admit, I wasn't expecting city government to reach out through anonymous text messages." Blackwood gestured to a pair of folding chairs set up in the otherwise empty storage unit. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss, such as why you felt the need to meet in a storage unit instead of your office. Because, Dr. Chen, some conversations require absolute privacy. You've stumbled into something much larger than a neighborhood dispute." Marcus remained standing. "I'm listening." Blackwood's smile never wavered, but his eyes grew cold. "Janet Morrison is what you might call a mid-level manager in a much larger organization. Her little HOA scam generates about $200,000 a year in revenue. Useful, but hardly essential. So why are you here? Because you've created a problem that extends far beyond Willowbrook subdivision. Your investigation has the potential to expose relationships that have been carefully maintained for decades." Blackwood walked to a metal shelf against the far wall and retrieved a thick manila folder. "Janet Morrison has been feeding information about her residents to a data brokerage firm that specializes in financial profiling. They use HOA violation patterns to identify homeowners who might be vulnerable to predatory lending schemes." Marcus felt his stomach drop. What kind of schemes? Reverse mortgages for elderly residents facing large repair bills, high-interest home equity loans for families desperate to avoid HOA fines, bankruptcy proceedings that allow certain investment firms to acquire properties at below-market prices. Jesus Christ. The data from Willowbrook alone has facilitated the acquisition of 47 properties over the past 3 years, properties that are now managed by a company called Desert Rose Holdings. Marcus knew that name, Desert Rose. Holdings had been buying up distressed properties all over Phoenix, converting them to rentals and driving up housing costs throughout the city. "Let me guess," Marcus said, "you have a financial interest in Desert Rose Holdings." "I have a financial interest in maintaining stability in this city, Dr. Chen. The housing market, the development pipeline, the tax base that funds essential services. Your little crusade threatens to unravel carefully balanced economic relationships." "You mean corruption?" Blackwood's smile finally disappeared. "I mean survival. Do you have any idea how many people depend on the current system? City employees, contractors, real estate professionals, banking relationships? You're not fighting corruption, Dr. Chen. You're fighting an ecosystem." Marcus walked to the storage unit entrance, suddenly feeling claustrophobic. "So, what do you want from me?" "I want you to accept a very generous settlement offer. Your neighbors get their water lines fixed for free. The HOA drops all outstanding fines. Janet Morrison disappears quietly early retirement, perhaps a nice condo in Florida. Everyone wins, except the next neighborhood and the one after that. Dr. Chen, You're a trauma surgeon. You understand triage. Sometimes you have to make hard choices about who to save. Marcus turned back to face Blackwood, his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. Councilman, I've spent 15 years in emergency medicine. I've seen what happens when systems fail, when people die because someone decided their lives weren't worth the cost of fixing a broken process. This is different. No, it's not. It's exactly the same. You're asking me to let people suffer so that you and your friends can keep profiting from their misery. Blackwood reached into his jacket and pulled out another folder. Before you make any heroic speeches, you should know that we've done our own investigation into your background. He handed Marcus a set of photographs. The first showed Marcus leaving a hotel with a woman who wasn't his ex-wife. The second showed him at a casino in Las Vegas. The third showed him in what appeared to be a heated argument with a hospital administrator. Dr. Marcus Chen, Blackwood said, his voice taking on a prosecutorial tone. Divorced, following an extramarital affair. Gambling problem that resulted in significant debt. History of conflicts with hospital administration over patient care decisions that cost the hospital money. Marcus stared at the photos, his hands trembling slightly. Everything was true, technically, but stripped of context. The affair was during my divorce proceedings, after my wife and I had separated. The casino photos are from my bachelor party. And the conflicts with administration were about refusing to discharge patients who needed continued care. The truth is often less important than perception. Dr. Chen, how do you think these photos would look on the evening news? What would happen to your medical license if the hospital board decided you were a liability? Marcus felt the familiar sensation of being pushed too far, but this time it was different. This time he was ready for it. Councilman Blackwood, you made a critical error in judgment tonight. Did I? Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Blackwood the screen. A recording app had been running for the past 10 minutes. You just confessed to running a criminal enterprise that spans city government, the banking industry, and real estate development. You admitted to conspiracy, racketeering, and extortion, and you did it all while threatening a witness in a federal investigation. Blackwood's face went ashen. That recording is inadmissible. Arizona is a two-party consent state. You're right, but this isn't. Marcus pointed to a small device attached to his keychain. That's a GPS tracker with an audio transmitter. My neighbor Derek has been listening to this entire conversation from his car outside. In Arizona, third-party surveillance is legal as long as one party consents. The storage unit suddenly felt much smaller. Blackwood's carefully maintained composure cracked completely. You have no idea what you're dealing with, he whispered. The people I work with don't make mistakes. They don't leave witnesses. Is that a threat, Councilman? It's a promise. Marcus walked toward the storage unit entrance, then paused. Councilman, I have one more thing to tell you. While you were setting up this meeting, the FBI was executing search warrants on Janet Morrison's home, office, and safety deposit boxes. Your little ecosystem is about to become a federal case. Blackwood stared at him in shock. That's impossible. We would have been notified. Actually, you wouldn't. See, when I filed that complaint with the Attorney General yesterday, I also sent copies to the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. They were very interested in the interstate banking connections you just described. Very interested indeed. As Marcus walked away from the storage unit, he could hear Blackwood frantically making phone calls. But it was too late. The dominoes were already falling. His phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Holy shit, Marcus! You just recorded a city councilman confessing to running a criminal enterprise. Another text, this one from his attorney, FBI wants to meet tomorrow morning. They're offering full witness protection. This is bigger than we thought. Marcus sat in his truck for a moment, processing what had just happened. 12 hours ago, he'd been fighting a local HOA dispute. Now he was a federal witness in a corruption case that could bring down half of Phoenix City government. But as he drove home through the quiet streets of Willowbrook, past houses where families were sleeping peacefully with their working water and functioning sprinkler systems, Marcus realized that sometimes the most important battles are the ones you never expected to fight. His phone rang one last time. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. Dr. Chen. The voice was female, nervous, familiar. This is Marcus. This is Detective Sarah Martinez, Phoenix PD. I'm calling to inform you that Janet Morrison posted bail 3 hours ago. Her attorney filed an emergency motion, claiming prosecutorial misconduct. Marcus felt his blood run cold. What kind of motion? They're claiming the evidence against her was obtained through illegal surveillance and witness intimidation. They're saying you coerced Carl Brennan into providing false testimony. That's ridiculous. I know it is. But her attorney is Thomas Blackwood, one of the best defense lawyers in the state. He's also Councilman Blackwood's son. Marcus closed, his eyes finally understanding the scope of what he was facing. This wasn't just corruption, it was a family business. Detective Martinez, are you calling to warn me or arrest me? Dr. Chen, I've been investigating corruption in this city for IG. Marcus woke up to the sound of his doorbell ringing at 6:30 a.m. Through the peephole, he could see Detective Martinez standing on his porch with two men in FBI windbreakers and a woman in a business suit carrying a briefcase. Dr. Chen, this is Special Agent Rodriguez and Special Agent Kim from the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. Detective Martinez said as Marcus opened the door. The room had been transformed into a command center. Agent Rodriguez was setting up recording equipment while Agent Kim spread photographs across the coffee table. The photos showed bank transfers, property deeds, and what appeared to be surveillance shots of various city officials. Walsh said, her voice crisp and professional. Your recording last night opened the door to the largest public corruption investigation in Arizona state history. We've been tracking suspicious property acquisitions for 2 years, but we never had the connection to city government. How big are we talking about? Marcus asked. Agent Kim pulled out a whiteboard and began sketching an organizational chart. Richard Blackwood sits on the city council and controls zoning decisions. His son Thomas represents developers who want to build hidden city housing at below-market prices, and Janet Morrison creates the distress. Detective Martinez added, through fake HOA violations that force homeowners into financial hardship. But it gets worse, Agent Rodriguez said, pointing to bank records. The predatory lending operation has generated over $40 million in the past 5 years, and the Blackwoods have been using city pension funds to finance their real estate acquisitions. Marcus felt sick. You're telling me they've been stealing from city employee retirement accounts? Not stealing, Walsh corrected, making high investments with guaranteed returns for themselves. When the investments fail, the pension fund absorbs the losses. When they succeed, the Blackwoods pocket the profits. That's thousands of people whose retirement security has been compromised. Detective Martinez said, police officers, firefighters, teachers, people who dedicated their lives to public service. Agent Kim's phone buzzed. She answered, spoke quietly for a moment, then hung up with a grim expression. We have a problem. Filed a motion to have all evidence obtained through Dr. Chen's investigation thrown out. He's claiming entrapment and illegal surveillance. Can he do that? Marcus asked. He can try, Walsh said. Shigo Detective Martinez pulled up a map on her laptop. The Blackwoods own property in 6 states. Vacation homes, hunting lodges, corporate retreats. She could be anywhere. People this deep into corruption don't usually go quietly. As if summoned by his words, Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed Derek's number. Marcus, you need to get over here now. Something's wrong with the water. What do you mean? The water coming out of my taps is brown, and it smells like chemicals. Mrs. Patterson called poison control. Don't drink it. Don't cook with it. Don't bathe in it. Agent Rodriguez was on his radio before Marcus finished the sentence. This is Rodriguez. I need hazmat teams dispatched to Willowbrook subdivision immediately. Possible water contamination. Vehicles and police cars. Sirens wailing. As they turned into the subdivision, Marcus could see neighbors standing in their yards, looking confused and frightened. Children were crying. Several people appeared to be vomiting. Derek ran up to them as they parked. It started about an hour ago. The water turned brown, then it started smelling like bleach mixed with something else. Something industrial. Agent Kim was already suiting up in protective gear. We need to shut off the main water supply and test everything before more people get sick. How many people have been exposed? Detective Martinez asked. The Hendersons' baby was drinking formula made with the water. They rushed her to the hospital. Marcus felt rage building in his chest unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Stealing from pension funds was criminal, but poisoning children. That was attempted murder. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Back off, or next time it won't be reversible. J.M. Marcus showed the message to Agent Rodriguez, who immediately called for backup. announced, "Nobody goes home until we know exactly what was put in that water." It took the hazmat team 3 hours to determine that someone had introduced industrial bleach and ammonia, compounds into the main water-liner combination that created chloramine gas when mixed. Respiratory irritation. In larger concentrations, it could be fatal. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing, the team leader reported. This wasn't random vandalism. This was a calculated chemical attack. Agent Kim's phone rang. She listened for a moment, then turned to the group with a shocked expression. They found Janet Morrison. She's in the emergency room at Phoenix General. Apparent suicide attempt. They think she was mixing the chemicals when something went wrong. Detective Martinez shook her head. Or someone decided she knew too much. They drove to the hospital in grim silence. Lay unconscious, connected to a ventilator. Her skin had the grayish pallor of severe chemical exposure. The attending physician, Dr. Sarah Kim, approached them with Janet's chart. She's been unconscious since the paramedics found her. Severe lung damage from chloramine exposure. If she survives, she may never be able to testify. Convenient, Agent Rodriguez muttered. Dr. Kim frowned. There's something else. We found trace amounts of propofol in her bloodstream. That's a surgical anesthetic. Someone sedated her before the chemical exposure. Marcus felt the pieces clicking into place. Means, Detective Martinez said, the real perpetrator is still out there. Agent Kim's radio crackled to life. All units, be advised. Thomas Blackwood's law firm was just raided by federal agents. Multiple arrests. He's gone. Private jet left Phoenix Sky Harbor 2 hours ago. Flight plan filed for a non-extradition country. Marcus stared at Janet Morrison's unconscious form, thinking about the trail of destruction the Blackwoods had left behind. Stolen pensions, manipulated zoning decisions, predatory lending schemes, and now attempted mass poisoning. But as he walked back to the waiting room, where he could see his neighbors gathered with worried faces, Marcus realized that the Blackwoods had made one final, fatal error. Detective Martinez joined him by the window overlooking the parking lot. "What are you thinking, Dr. Chen?" "I'm thinking that Richard Blackwood made a mistake when he fled the country." "How so?" Marcus turned to face her, his expression calm but determined. He left his son behind. "I think," Marcus said, watching as FBI agents led a handcuffed Thomas Blackwood past the hospital windows, "that some family businesses don't survive when the pressure gets too intense." Agent Rodriguez approached them with a satisfied expression. "Dr. Chen, I have some news." Thomas Blackwood's law firm had copies of every document related to the corruption scheme. Bank records, property transfers, communications with city officials. Everything we need to dismantle the entire operation. And Thomas? He's already asking about witness protection. Seems he's been keeping insurance files on his father for years, just in case something like this happened. At the Willowbrook subdivision in the distance, where hazmat teams were still working to ensure the water supply was safe, in a few hours, his neighbors would be able to return to their homes. Their children would be safe. Their retirement funds would be protected, and the Blackwood criminal empire would be nothing but a memory. But Marcus knew that the real victory wasn't the destruction of a corruption network. It was the proof that ordinary people, when pushed too far, could fight back against systems designed to exploit them. His phone buzzed with a message from Derek. "Water's clean. Neighbors want to throw a block party this weekend. You up for it?" Marcus smiled for the first time in days. "Yeah," he typed back. "I think I am." 6 months later, Marcus stood on his front porch, watching the sunrise paint the mountains orange and pink behind the Phoenix skyline. His roses had not only recovered from their brief water crisis, they were thriving. The new irrigation system, installed with the settlement money from the city, was a thing of beauty, precisely calibrated, efficient, and completely legal. His phone buzzed with the morning news alert he'd been waiting for. Former Phoenix City Councilman Richard Blackwood extradited to face federal charges. It had taken 6 months, 3 countries, and a small army of federal agents. But they'd finally caught up with Richard Blackwood in a beachfront villa in Costa Rica. His extradition had been expedited after Thomas Blackwood's testimony revealed the location of offshore accounts containing over $80 million in stolen pension funds. Marcus's doorbell rang. He opened it to find Derek holding 2 cups of coffee and a newspaper with Blackwood's mugshot splashed across the front page. "Thought you might want to see this," Derek said, handing him a cup. "The headline's pretty good. Water War Whistleblower Brings Down Political Dynasty." Marcus scanned the article, which detailed how his initial complaint about a severed water line had ultimately led to the largest public corruption conviction in Arizona history. The Blackwood family's criminal enterprise had been completely dismantled. Desert Rose Holdings had been forced to sell off its properties, with the proceeds going to victim compensation. The predatory lending scheme had been shut down, and affected homeowners were receiving full restitution. "Says here that Thomas Blackwood got 12 years, Derek noted. His cooperation only went so far. 12 years for conspiracy, racketeering, and money laundering, Marcus read. Could have been worse. And Janet Morrison. Marcus's expression grew somber. Still in long-term care, the lung damage was too severe. She'd never fully recover. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the neighborhood come to life. Children walked to the school bus stop, sprinklers whispered across green lawns, and the smell of breakfast drifted from kitchen windows. It looked like any other suburban morning, except for the small plaque by the community entrance that read, "Willowbrook Subdivision, where neighbors stand together." The plaque had been Derek's idea, approved unanimously by the new Homeowners Association that had replaced the old HOA board. The new association had exactly one rule. All meetings were open to the public. All votes were by secret ballot, and no board member could have any financial interest in companies doing business with the community. "How's Carl doing?" Derek asked. "Good. He started his own construction company legitimately this time. He's doing the renovations on the community center." Carl Brennan had become something of a local hero after his testimony helped convict the Blackwoods. His new company, Willowbrook Construction, had a waiting list of customers who specifically wanted to hire the contractor who'd helped bring down the corruption ring. Marcus's phone rang. Detective Martinez. "Morning, Doc. I've got some news. You'll want to hear good news or bad news. Depends on your perspective. The FBI just arrested 3 more city officials based on evidence from the Blackwood files. Turns out the corruption went even deeper than we thought." Marcus sighed. "How much deeper?" "Building inspectors, zoning commissioners, even some judges. The whole system was compromised. But here's the good news. The new city administration is implementing oversight reforms based on recommendations from your case. They're calling it the Chen Protocol." The Chen Protocol, named after the doctor who refused to let them intimidate him into silence. Mandatory financial disclosure for all city officials. Independent oversight of HOA regulations, and whistleblower protections for residents who report corruption. After Marcus hung up, Derek raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. "To the Chen Protocol, may it make life hell for corrupt politicians everywhere." They were interrupted by the sound of car doors slamming. Mrs. Patterson was getting out of a taxi, followed by her husband Frank and what appeared to be a small army of relatives. "Dr. Chen," she called out, waving enthusiastically. "Perfect timing." She hurried over, practically bouncing with excitement. "I just got back from City Hall. The settlement check came through. $150,000 in compensation for the water poisoning, plus all medical expenses covered." Frank Patterson shook Marcus's hand firmly. "Doc, I don't know how to thank you. That money's going to let us keep the house. We were looking at foreclosure before all this happened." Similar stories had been playing out across the neighborhood for months. The class action lawsuit against the city had resulted in significant settlements for all affected residents. Some used the money to pay off mortgages that had been inflated by predatory lending schemes. Others invested in home improvements or their children's education. A few, like the Rodriguez family, had used their settlement to start small businesses. "There's something else," Mrs. Patterson said, pulling an envelope from her purse. "The new city council voted unanimously to rename the street. We're now living on Chen Drive." Marcus stared at the official city document, feeling simultaneously honored and embarrassed. "Mrs. Patterson, you didn't have to, Dr. Chen," she interrupted. 6 months ago, we were all victims. We were isolated, scared, and getting picked off one by people who thought we were powerless. You showed us that we weren't. We all did that together." "Mo," Derek said firmly, "we all benefited from it together, but you started it." You were the one who refused to back down when it would have been easier to just pay the $8,000 and move on." As if summoned by the conversation, more neighbors began emerging from their houses. The Hendersons, whose baby had been hospitalized during the water poisoning, the Patel family, who'd been facing foreclosure before the settlement, Tom Bradley, who'd used his compensation to expand his construction business and was now employing 3 other neighborhood residents. Soon, Marcus's front yard was filled with people, and what had started as a casual conversation had transformed into an impromptu community gathering. "Speech," someone called out. Others picked up the chant until Marcus found himself standing on his porch steps, looking out at a crowd of neighbors who'd become something more. They'd become a family forged by shared struggle and mutual support. "I'm not good at speeches," Marcus began, which earned him a few laughs. "6 months ago, I came home from a 14-hour shift at the hospital and found a hole in my yard where my water line used to be. I was angry, I was tired, and I was ready to fight." He paused, looking at the faces in the crowd. People who'd trusted him to lead them into battle against forces they didn't fully understand. "But what I learned is that the fight was never really about water lines or HOA violations or even corruption. It was about whether ordinary people have the right to live their lives without being exploited by those in power." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. "The Blackwoods thought they could intimidate us into submission because they've gotten away with it for so long. They thought we were just individual homeowners who could be picked off one by one. They never imagined we'd come together as a community. And now," Derek called out. Marcus smiled, thinking about Richard Blackwood sitting in a federal detention center, about Thomas Blackwood serving his sentence, about the Chen Protocol being implemented across the city. Now they know better. Now everyone knows that when you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. The crowd erupted in applause. Children ran between the adults, playing games that would have been impossible 6 months ago, when their parents were too stressed about money and home repairs to organize community gatherings. As the impromptu celebration continued, Marcus found himself thinking about the chain of events that had led to this moment. A severed water line had exposed a criminal conspiracy. A neighborhood dispute had become a federal case. A fight over $8,000 in repairs had ultimately recovered $80 million in stolen public funds. But more than that, it had proved something that Marcus had learned in the ICU, but had forgotten in the isolation of suburban life, that ordinary people, when they refuse to accept injustice, are capable of extraordinary things. His phone buzzed one last time, a text from an unknown number, but this time Marcus wasn't worried. The unknown numbers these days usually brought good news job offers for consulting on corruption cases, speaking requests from community organizations, or messages from other neighborhoods facing similar problems and asking for advice. This message was from a Dr. Sarah Williams in Tucson. "Dr. Chen, our HOA, is trying to force us to use a specific contractor for roof repairs. The quotes are 3 times the market rate. Can you help?" Marcus looked out at his neighbors, his community, his street that now bore his name. He thought about the roses thriving in his garden, watered by a system that was honest and legal and built to last. Then he typed back, "Dr. Williams, I think you're going to need to organize your neighbors. Let me tell you how this works, ... because the fight for justice never really ends. It just finds new battles, new communities, new people who are ready to refuse to back down. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it starts with something as simple as a severed water line." The end.